Buongiorno, everybody.
Hello.
This week on Adventures with Sarah, we are doing our Where in the World specials again. And this week, Where in the World is the Danube. And we thought it would be fun to do a Cucina Quarantena segment that focused on Hungarian food. And Luca stepped right in because he knows a lot about Central Europe. And what did you want to do?
Goulash.
Yeah. So I went out and bought all of the ingredients, and today's Cucina Quarantena is presented to you by Luca. All right, son, get cooking.
Goulash actually has before I started, I was warming up the pan before I started because you need a hot pan for the first step, which is meat. So you want to get meat on a very hot pan, and you're going to start browning. And I have completely forgotten to get a wooden spatula, which you can use. So I'm not.
I'm really disappointed in your lack of organization. He watches all of those wonderful cooking shows, like You Suck at Cooking incessantly, and so this is his own version today.
This is a recipe that I got from a guy called Chef John from Food Wishes. If you want any recipe, he's been on YouTube for years and years. He is excellent. And so I'm going to keep on chopping up because that's only half of the meat that we're going to use. We're going to be using 2.5 pounds. You're going to want to cut the meat up into just little portions like this, enough fork size, so that however much you can fit on a fork, that's how much you chop it. And so,
and we bought stew meat. We bought a whole roast, and part of that was when I went to the butcher's at the grocery store. The stew meat looked kind of funky and gray, but it was the same price as a much nicer cut of meat that was whole, which was very weird, right? Are there any other reasons you want to buy a whole roast instead of pre-cut stew meat?
Well, as the guy needs to describe it to me, he says, well, you want to buy this stew meat because the stew meat is the thing you cannot sell otherwise under any circumstances. And so just paying extra, just the worst quality meat imaginable. So if you know.
Hang on just a second. We've got a small technical difficulty.
All right, sorry guys. Somebody had mentioned we were hard to hear, and it was because my AirPods were still connected to my phone. So we're still cooking goulash here on Adventures with Sarah with Luca, and I hope the sound has improved. So please let me know if you can hear us better now. This is a beef chuck pot roast that Luca is cutting up here.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, so as you can see, I'm cutting up little just fork-sized pieces. Like this piece might even be too small, but it doesn't matter because we're going to be putting that into our mouths. So yeah, you don't want to choke on any of these pieces. You don't want to choke on any of these pieces.
All right. Okay, so if you guys didn't hear what we were doing before because the sound was off because it was connected to my AirPods, we are making Hungarian goulash. And you had two options, Luca. You said we could do it as a stew or as a soup.
Yes. So there's two ways to serve this up, kind of as a stew with a thick sauce on noodles. And also, I'm going to flip the meat now because I think it's browned. Yeah, is that brown? Did you get that browned?
Let's see. I think, you can, but you're going to have to scrape a little bit. And I think your temperature of your pan, I guess you're pretty good.
It's pretty much the hottest of the hottest, yeah.
So he's got the Dutch oven waiting because we're actually going to cook it in my Dutch oven, but we're going to do the browning in the saute pan of all the different ingredients. So he's got that waiting so he can just flip all of the completed pieces of meat over into the stew pot, right?
Yes. I think I might have flipped a little bit too early. It's okay. It's all going to end up in the same place in the end, but you really want to get that brown bit. You see that?
Yeah.
You might think that that's just burned bits, but what that is that's basically super condensed meat. It's like what happens when you take a soup broth and really condense it down.
Yeah.
And so later on, we're going to actually deglaze that, I think is what they call it, with some of this beef broth here.
All right.
And that's going to scoop all the goodness. And
all right.
Anyway,
so go ahead and get some chopping done.
When I was saying that you can have this as a stew or a soup, and you can have this as a stew or a soup. And if you're gonna have it with a stew, you're probably gonna want to put it on something like maybe noodles or rice or basically any carb. Sure, you could spread it on toast, but I'm not sure if many people would be inclined to that. But it's more of like a sauce plus meat and onions.
Yeah.
Versus if you do it if you do it with a soup, then it's meat and onions.
Can I quickly comment that I think this is maybe a little too small to be cutting these. I think you need to be cutting them just slightly bigger.
All right, I can do that.
Also, it will take you less time in that case.
And
There, that's good. Just those pieces like that size I think that's good. Yeah, I wouldn't go any smaller than that. Also, the reason I don't think I'd go smaller is that it'll completely break down and it'll turn into like liquefied meat. Yeah, that's good. That's perfect.
and I am cutting this up while I am waiting for the oven to brown. Yeah. And
Would you like me to flip the meat? Well,
no, I don't think it's quite browned yet.
okay.
But so I believe we're on the Danube this week, which is
Yes.
Central Europe, and Central Europe is a very interesting place because I'm just going to go to some quick history facts because that's what I like to talk about. But Hungarian is a really interesting language because there is no other language exactly like it. Like, you have maybe in Italy and in France very similar languages. Like, I'm learning French and I can understand some, very little, but some of what my mom is saying when she's talking in Italian. In Hungarian, no other language you can understand, and that's because in the, I think it's 800s, the Hungarian people, or as they were called back then, the Magyars, and that's actually what the Hungarians still call themselves, Magyars. They were a tribe of Eastern Europeans, kind of like Mongols, but different, that migrated over the Carpathians and settled into the area of the Danube. And really, that was a really big deal because at the time, I think it was controlled by the Pannonians, and they were tribes that had been there since like the Roman era, and so the Austrians actually had to defeat. And so now what I'm doing is I'm going to put this meat into this pot, which is going to be used for stewing it later on. So,
And we love this pot because this is a glazed cast iron pan. So this is one by Staub, and you guys have probably seen me cook with this before. And it is fantastic because it really stews in keeps in the juices. And here's what's really cool for doing something like a goulash is that the lid here, like this, has all these little dimples. So when we are actually cooking the meat, any kind of juices or the evaporation in the steam will gather on the roof of the pot and then drip back down onto the meat. So it's sort of like self-marinating. So if you don't have one like this, I think it's a really good investment to get one of these. Le Creuset does something kind of similar as well.
I added a little bit more olive oil because we love olive oil. So.
Yeah. So somebody asked if they thought we were on our road trip. That starts Friday. So we're going to leave at around 9 a.m. on Friday, and we're going to head down to Oregon and then try to make it to Sacramento by Saturday afternoon. So we're lining things up, and I've been so grateful to hear all of the fun things that people have suggested. We're going to visit with a few of you guys who watch Adventures with Sarah regularly. We're going to have lunch, and we're going to have a wine tasting with somebody. We're going to be meeting just for coffees with a lot of different people. So the kids are looking forward to meeting some of you who have invited us over. It's going to be a lot of fun.
So I'm going to take a brief detour from Central European history to show you how to chop onions. Very different things, I know. I've just jumped into things.
You're just talented in many ways, my child.
So, the way that I like to chop onions, and that I've heard other people, like chefs and stuff, like to chop onions, is that you slice it into bits like this.
Yep.
Along the back. Make sure not to cut your fingers. And then you line it up along your knife like this. Mm-hmm. And then chop like that.
Yeah, that is a really simple way to chop onions.
And it ends in really nice, even little pieces like that. And
Yeah, so don't ever get overly like in too much of a hurry to cut your onion in half. You should start by cutting off the top, the bottom, and then cut it in half, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, back to Central European history. So, the Magyars in the 800s migrated into what is now Hungary, and they were at odds very much with the Austrians, who were the kind of ruling dominant power, or the Holy Roman Empire. And so, they settled down and they established their own kingdom. And basically, throughout history, they have been there with their own language. And so, yeah, this was in a cool period of really cool tribal migrations. The only other group. I'm actually not going to chop this meat because
okay. Sorry.
It was 2 pounds and it was. But the over time, the Hungarians got more and more intertwined with the Holy Roman Empire. Eventually, they were even incorporated into the Austrian or the Habsburg Empire through marriage with the king in 1445, I think. And so that is, and so they were basically under Austrian domination for years and years, centuries. I think it was, and they were only very recently independent in the after the Treaty of Versailles.
Okay, so just shifting real quickly from your hardcore history lesson here.
Yeah.
I just want to review what the ingredients of this dish are, because we're doing cucina quarantena. So we have that beef chuck roast, which is about 2.5 pounds. We've got an onion, a whole onion that he has kind of rough diced. We have beef broth sitting here. We have got spices. Can you tell me what spices we've got here, Lou?
So this is 2 teaspoons of caraway seed. This is 1 teaspoon of dried marjoram. This is half a teaspoon, maybe a little bit less. I didn't measure it that well. Of
Cayenne.
Cayenne, sorry.
Probably we don't want to use even all of that.
Yeah. And this is a half a teaspoon of what is going to be a half a teaspoon of thyme. And this is the big one. This is 2 tablespoons of paprika.
Okay.
It's a lot of paprika. And actually, a lot of Hungarian cooking uses paprika. They love paprika in Hungary. And yeah, they even have, like, I think their national dessert or something like that. One of their national dishes is a paprika cake.
Wow.
Putting paprika in.
Well, and there are different kinds of paprika too, because this right here is just the sweet kind. But when I've gone to buy paprika at like Market Spice, you can get the smoky kind, you can get the sweet kind, or you can get the spicy kind. So there's lots of different kinds of paprika. So we're using sweet paprika for this recipe, right?
We are. And now we're going to get the onions in. And this is probably the bit that's going to take the longest.
Well, the onions don't take too long. So you're just going to saute them, because you don't actually need to cook them entirely through. We're just going to kind of start to wilt them, right?
Yeah, we want them until they're kind of brown and leaving their own mark on the pan, and that's going to take a while. But at least
we're using a mega saute pan. I'm not sure everybody has a saute pan this big, but I would say that's about 16 to 17 inches across. So if you don't have a mega saute pan, that's okay. Just a regular frying pan will work too. And we've got all our meat in here, so we're just piling all the ingredients in there, right, Luca?
we are indeed.
All right, and we're not going to finish this dish in this live stream, right?
We're not, because it's going to take about 1 or 2 hours to actually stew the meat so that it's not really tough. We want it to be nice and folly-hardy and all that good stuff.
So in that case, because you're going to be stewing it for so long, it doesn't matter if it's an expensive cut, right?
Not really, no. Not really at all. Which is the only thing that the price that actually matters is how cheap it is. And as you can see, we're browning the onions. We kind of want to make them like a little bit see-through, or before we put it into the pot. they're browning a lot right now, which is good.
So what we're kind of doing here is we're individually browning each of the ingredients that go in here. So you could, I suppose, if you wanted to express this to make it easier and not dirty an extra pan, I suppose you could do it all in the same pan, but it probably wouldn't be the same result, right?
Yeah, it wouldn't be, because the thing that really makes the dish is the thing right there, if you can see it.
Yeah.
The brown stuff. And because that's where the flavor is. And that's where the flavor in lots of stew is the brownness in the middle.
Smells really good so far, and we've hardly done anything at all. Well, this is just onions and meat. And this actually works really well for people like us because we're on the keto diet still. We're trying to keep our carbohydrates really low. So what we can do with this is that we can just have the stew straight up. We can avoid putting it on noodles. We could also put it on what, like maybe mashed broccoli or mashed cauliflower, right?
We could.
No. What's your take on how you'd like to serve this one instead?
I'm actually going to take my little bit and I'm going to add extra broth to it, and I'm going to make it a soup, because I think that just meat soup, that sounds really good to me. I'm not sure what, I figure that I'll make like noodles to go along with it, because that's what it's typically served on, egg noodles.
Yeah.
And so...
Yeah, I think your fond is pretty well developed, and I think it might be time to move those over to the rest of the pot, right?
That's it, so.
Okay.
Pretty brown.
I love that pan, but I'm glad you're cooking with it. The reason I don't use that one very often is that it weighs so much. I'm afraid I'm going to break my wrist when I'm using it. All right.
Oh, oops, daisies. Well, you make mistakes. As Bob Ross
Yeah.
would say, happy accidents.
Just don't catch my kitchen on fire. All right, so what's
And
next?
now, the most interesting part. This is the thing that one of the recipes recommended. We're going to toast the spices by putting them all in to...
This is the colorful part.
Yeah, look at this. And now we're going to add a bit of thyme. The reason that I'm not the reason that despite it being the same amounts, but I am not measuring thyme, but I am measuring the cayenne, is that cayenne is really strong, and you should not really ever you should really not ever do that by hand, by just kind of shaking cayenne into a pot. That's a very bad idea.
So you're just going to be toasting this a little bit until it gets a little bit of a smoky scent.
Yes.
And I'm going to just jump in here because I want to smell. Let's see. Oh, smells really good. Oh boy, yeah, that's getting toasty real quick. The caraway in particular, I think caraway is really interesting. And before you started this, you actually took the caraway and put it into the mortar and pestle and crushed it just a little bit, right?
I did.
That sort of releases some of the flavors. It's getting real nice and stuck on, which means that when you actually get the liquid in here and deglaze it, it's going to be great. Okay?
I figured that's good. So now we're going to add 1 cup out of 4 cups of our broth. And this is the part where you're going to need to put in a little bit of elbow grease, because this is where you're going to want to scrape up.
Okay, there we go.
So you're going to need to put in some elbow grease here. And so before, the pot was pretty evenly coated in a brown stuff. I scraped all of that up. You just kind of need to press, not that hard, but press and then scrape. And then that's how you get all the good stuff from the bottom of the pan. And now we're just going to pour all that on top of this. And I'm actually going to probably add a little bit more to
Look how pretty that
pot.
is. That looks really good.
Yeah, it does.
And now you're going to deglaze more so you can get all the rest of the burnt bits off. Yep.
So where else do I need to go? Looks like I didn't get it all here.
That's going to be a very flavorful sauce you're going to cook the meat in.
Yeah, and goulash is originally Hungarian, but it's popular all over, everywhere. And you might have heard of it. Might have heard of it from Russian or stuff like that. Because Hungary used to be an Eastern Bloc country. And
Okay, so what's the next step?
so now the next step is the longest step.
I think you need to put a little bit more broth in, right?
More broth. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it should more or less not quite cover the meat, but...
Oh, yeah.
And you need your tomato...
I thought you meant add more to the pot. No, we're going to add...
tomato
we're gonna
paste.
Add 3 more cups to this.
Plus you're going to put in your tomato paste and your balsamic, right?
Yes. And you need a 1/4 cup of balsamic vinegar. I'm trying to find my cup measurement here. There it is. And now, so we're going to 1 cup, 2 cups, and 3 cups. That's on top of the 1 cup that I used to deglaze the pans. So that's 4 cups in total. And so now we're going to want to add. Allow me to just get the 1/4 cup measurement. I'm sorry.
You can eyeball it. Just eyeball it. You don't need to measure it. You just use almost everything that's in there.
Almost everything is in it.
Yeah.
So now,
just eyeball it, Luca. You don't need to put it in the measure.
Now, 1/4 cup. Lots of tomato paste. That's what you like to see.
MJ says that Melva says that she can smell it. It smells wonderful.
It is very strong smelling, and that is a very good thing.
I think that's good.
That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
So I don't really know how to eyeball a 1/4 cup measurement. I'm not very familiar with it. Now, it says to add 3 cloves of garlic. That is not. It says to add 3 cloves of garlic. However, we have this amazing invention from you get this from Trader Joe's, right?
Yeah, Trader Joe's.
Trader Joe's came up with this an amazing invention that is little frozen cubes of garlic that is about 1 clove each. Is that right?
Yep, they're 1 clove each.
And then we're just going to add 3 of these. These are very strong, so...
They're fantastic. That's one of my best cooking tips is to always buy these Trader Joe's things. And they have basil and they also have ginger.
We're just going to add a whole bunch of pepper. Just a ton of pepper. This is big stuff, so big amounts of pepper.
Okay. And then I think your last ingredient is the balsamic. Is that right?
Salt too.
Okay.
I have not added any salt so far. I should have salted the meat and peppered the meat, but I forgot to do that because I am dumb and stupid.
But in the end, it doesn't actually matter because you can get your saltiness in the sauce. Yeah, that's probably good. I don't go too crazy with salt though because you can't go back.
You can't go back, but also don't remember to go too skimpy on salt because then it will be flavorless.
Well, no, but you can.
Don't feel too shy, but just a little shy.
You can add it later though.
You can.
All right, and now add your vinegar, and then I think we're ready to let her stew.
And where's the balsamic vinegar? Balsamic vinegar? That is not the balsamic.
That is actually.
That is? No, this is the coconut stuff.
Um,
There we are.
there you go.
Balsamico vinegar residuo. And we're going to
This is one of my favorite things to bring back from Italy, just for you guys watching, that when I buy my balsamic in Italy, I buy it in a spray bottle. This is just like salad vinegar, basically, but I love it because you can spray it on a salad. You put your oil in, you mix it, and then you just spray that in.
We're going to add a little bit of olive oil because why not?
Olive oil makes everything better.
You could probably make an olive oil pastry just like it's a clump of sugar and olive oil and flour.
The best gelato, bless you, that I've ever had was gelato made with olive oil. It was an olive oil gelato. And it was savory. So it had toppings like sea salt and sesame seeds. So it's kind of like savory sweet, kind of like people like peanut butter and chocolate, or they like salted caramel. That savory sweet thing is really superb.
There is one more ingredient, and actually...
Here, I'm going to go ahead and start the flame here because this is ready to cook. So we're going to cook this on a real high heat to start with, right?
Yes. What we're going to do is we're going to bring it to a simmer, and then we're going to reduce it to barely simmering, and then we're going to just cook it for 2 hours.
All right. So
I'm adding... It says to add a 1/2 teaspoon of sugar to balance out the acidity from the tomato paste as well. I'm adding 1 tablespoon of sugar because we have this keto sugar that is not quite as sweet.
yeah.
So, wait, did I say tablespoon? I meant teaspoon.
I wouldn't have put sugar in it personally, but that might be the secret to making it.
I think that's a good idea. But
Okay, so I think we have got all of the steps done. So if you could just review for people what all the ingredients you put in the pot were.
so first, you chop up 2.5
pounds of meat. You bake it in the pan for, you brown it in the pan in 2 batches. You throw it in here. You chop up 2 onions, and that was 2 onions there. I don't think I ever told you guys that. But you put in 2 onions. You brown the onions, make them a little translucent. Then you put in a whole variety of spices. I think it's 2 tablespoons of paprika, 1 teaspoon of
Marjoram.
1 teaspoon of marjoram, half a teaspoon of thyme, a teaspoon of 2 teaspoons of caraway seeds, and half a teaspoon of cayenne pepper. And then you brown that on top of all the brown bits. You put in a cup of beef broth or chicken broth. It called for chicken broth. We had beef broth, so we used it. It's going to be good either way. And then you deglaze it, and then you add 3 cups of that. Then you dump the deglazed stock into the pan in the pot, and then you add the remaining 3 cups of beef or chicken broth.
Then you add the balsamic vinegar and the tomato paste, because the tomato paste adds that umami flavor. And now we're just going to let it go. So how long is it going to cook like this, Luca?
2 hours.
2 hours. All right. So here's what we're going to do. Luca and I are going to finish cooking this up. We're going to have it simmer and see what happens, but I will be sure to post the finished product in the comments under this video. So come and check this out later on tonight, and we'll let you know how it went. And Luca, could you just tell us where you got this recipe from?
I got this from a YouTube channel called Food Wishes with a chef called Chef John. I would trust him with any dish. He's very good, and it's been on YouTube for a long time.
Yeah, so my kids love watching these food channels, and it's really fun to watch them cook. So I encourage you all to get in the kitchen and cook with your kids and cook with your grandkids if your kids are too old, because it's never too late to start cooking good food. So thank you and never too early. So thank you so much for joining us today for another Cucina Quarantena. We're going to continue on with our Danube theme this week. Tomorrow we're going to be having a live walking tour of Bratislava. So if you've never been to Bratislava, you don't know anything about Bratislava, you're going to learn a lot tomorrow. That should be around, I think, 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. So thanks again for joining us. And our road trip starts on Friday. All of you guys in California, if anybody wants to meet up with us, just shoot me a message. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Luca. Thanks, Chef Luca and Mini Chef Opal.